What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the ShowMeFootball.com podcast. And today I am joined by Ryan Tracy of Rogue Analytics, RGR Football, and Locked On Chiefs podcast. And Ryan, what's up? How you doing today?
I'm making it through. It's just another day before free agency hits, so I'm a little twitchy, but other than that, I'm fine.
Right. Yeah, it's a busy time of the year for sure, and I'm glad you can make it on once again because I know we had some hookups and stuff with the schedule, but it happens. But anyways, before we get into like football talk, I just wanted to ask you a little bit, just because I'm a huge fan, I look up to you a lot. Just questions about when did you really start like following the Chiefs and wanting to follow them in particular? Like what was the time that just made you like think this is the team that I kind of want to follow?
I grew up a fan of other teams. I'm a Navy brat, so we kind of moved around the country a lot. So I was never like sold on one particular fan base.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I started college at the University of Washington up in Seattle, right after they won a national championship, and wasn't able to get on the field there. So I had the opportunity to come down to Kansas and walk on down there. So I did. And as much as it is to be a college player, especially for somebody like me who was a walk-on and not very good, I was not qualified to be on a roster. It does lend itself towards following the local team. And that was right as Marty was in place and things were rising for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was a pretty natural progression from there.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Yeah, and I'm basically the same way. I'm here in St. Louis. I followed the Rams a lot when I was younger, when they were here. I also like the Chiefs too, but it was kind of one of those things where it's like, if they do good, I'm going to cheer for them just because they're the local team and everything. And then of course once they moved and that whole thing, I was just like full on Chiefs. That's who I cheer for now. That's my team, and I love it. But anyways, before I ask you a few more questions, I just wanted to talk about you over at your YouTube channel, it's pretty cool because like I said, I've been watching you for a few years and it's crazy to see the growth just from, 2 years ago. Now when people, talk about like the big Chiefs YouTubers, you're one of the first names that comes up. People, they watch RGR football for their Chiefs content, but just recently you started up a new members program for followers of your channel. Did you just want to share that a little bit? What that's all about?
Yeah, the memberships are a fun way to be a little bit more blatant, to tell you the truth, to not be, the whole concept of RGR is an extension of what I've done everywhere else, including the Locked On Chiefs podcast. It's a professional coverage aspect. It's not fan based. So right. I try not to get too fanny. I try not to get too rah-rah, It's about analysis. Right?
That's what we get over here. We're the rah-rah type over here.
Right, exactly. And there's tons of room for all that. So I don't need to do that. But for me, like being somebody who's an ex-coach and a strength and conditioning coach for like 20 years, like I have a very specific aspect of it. It's not quite so fan-based for me. But every now and then I have things that I need to express that are in that realm, or at least more so, guys that I like or guys that I think really fit or things like that really aren't very, analyst unbiasedness.
Yeah.
So I put that behind the wall so that folks who really want to get my interior opinion and not my analysis first can get access to that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I said, over here, we're like kind of the rah-rah type. We're the people that jump on here after a loss. And me and my friend that we do the podcast here, we just, we're going off on all the players on the team, all that kind of stuff. But you're really like, you really just kind of tell it like you see it on the field. You're all 22 guy. You have the the athletic matrix that you do every year, which you should be coming out with this year again, right?
Oh yeah. As soon as we get as much data, this is a really strange year. Everything will be slid back towards the draft because Pro Days just literally started this last week, and that's the first data we're going to get.
Yeah, it's a crazy year for all that stuff. Almost even crazier than last year, just because teams are almost still trying to figure out how exactly they're going to do all this stuff, just because not too much has changed. But that could be a whole nother like podcast episode, all that stuff. But now to get into a little bit of football, I just wanted to ask you just relevant news. Of course, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz were released. What is it, 2 days ago now, and that leaves two pretty big holes at the tackle spot. And I got to say, like, I had came to terms with this towards the end of the season that Fisher and Schwartz were probably both going to be gone. But then Brett Veach had that press conference a week or two ago, and he talked about, hey, I think these guys might be ready for week one. And then boom, they're gone. What do you think happened there? What do you think developed? Do you think that thing was a smoke screen? And what do you think the Chiefs do going from here?
It's really interesting. I wouldn't say it was a deliberate smoke screen. I think it was like blatant optimism
Mhm.
that you're hoping that because they pushed and pushed and pushed to get Mitchell, especially back onto the field and hope that he could return without a surgical intervention, right? And so that he has that, he's told by his physicians that it's not going to be a hugely long recovery. So you get a little optimistic there, and then you start feeling good about Fish. And he says, Eric says himself that he's ahead of his progression in terms of his rehab. But at the end of the day, if you can't get something concrete, you as a GM have to be prepared for the worst. And at this point, I think that's what it comes down to. The cap certainly is what caused this.
Mhm.
If the cap was the normal, if it had gone up, the normal $8 million, or whatever it was going to be, this would not have happened, to tell you the truth. They
Right.
would have had the wherewithal to hold out and see what happens with their injuries. But that's it. Eric Fisher, I think, is more likely to recover fully and be able to be on a field again.
Mhm.
If that were to happen, I think the door would probably be open. Just depends on the money at that point.
Right, definitely. Always comes down to the money. And by the way, let me know if you're kind of running short on time and we can wrap things up. But I just have a few more questions stemming from that. So Mahomes restructured his contract yesterday. It was his signing bonus was converted, and that frees up around 13 million, I think it was that I saw. And my concern now is with Fisher and Schwartz gone is, do you draft another tackle? Do you have Niang on one side and then a rookie on the other side? Or is that too risky to have two first-year players on the bookends? Do you got to go and get a veteran offensive lineman or a veteran tackle? And do you think that's what the Chiefs will try to do with their cap space?
You have to do it all, because you're right. That is a risk, especially when you're talking about protecting the MVP.
Yeah.
Now, that said, you have some built-in redundancy. So if you do end up with Niang taking over the right spot, and they are pretty optimistic about him, if you do draft somebody for the left, you got to have a veteran behind them so that if something happens, you have a terrible game where you just realize that those guys just aren't ready. You have to have a swing guy that can step in. They are talking to Mike Remmers again. I expect that that's going to be a pretty cheap deal. So you might find yourself right back in the same position as last year, where Remmers is the first guy off the bench at either tackle spot.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not opposed to that. I noticed a huge spike in Mike Remmers' disrespect since the Super Bowl. Hey, the guy is not the best, but I thought he filled in pretty well. It was just that move to the left before the Super Bowl that just ruined everything. Like it was he was asked to do more than really what, he originally signed up for. And it's unfortunate, but I hope the Chiefs bring him back personally.
Yeah, and I agree with you. He's definitely more comfortable on the right. It was a break glass situation, and at that point in the season, having Fish go out the week before, it's not anything you're going to be able to replace. I would like to see them honestly not use Remmers as a swing. I'd like to see him be a dedicated backup right, and get another veteran in for the backup left and a draft pick, unless they do something crazy and go trade for some big name, which I actually don't see happening.
Yeah, and by the way, I would hope it doesn't, just because I'm someone who gets, this offseason is pretty big for us. Fans are getting a little antsy. They want to make it back to the Super Bowl. They want to win. They're really, they're kind of getting into that desperation mode now. And right now, I don't think it's a time where you want to be allocating, valuable draft picks towards a trade target. It's just not what I would do. But moving on to my next question real quick, I wanted to touch on the defensive line. So, the Chiefs, I think, are spending currently the most anyone has in NFL history on the defensive line. And this past season, they didn't rank in the top half in the league in sacks or rush yards allowed per game. And of course, there's been news that the Chiefs do want to add a veteran defensive end opposite Frank Clark. And, I have my personal concerns with Frank Clark, but, we've established it over and over again. He's not going anywhere. So really what you have to do at this point is just try to get him as much help as you can, him and Chris Jones. But where do you think that comes from? Is this maybe where the Chiefs look in free agency, or do you like anyone in particular in this this draft class to maybe address that spot?
I think it's really depressing if you look at pressures per dollar spent for the Chiefs in 2020.
Yeah.
So the idea of adding someone else in free agency, which is always going to be more expensive than the draft, is disheartening. And I think, quite frankly, not something they can afford to do unless they do another restructure deal with someone else. And Patrick, actually, it was a roster bonus that went to signing, and that's what allowed the space. And it actually ends up a touch over 17. So it's bigger than it sounds. It's still not enough to get an actual impact guy, but they have several other things they can still do if they choose to do another restructure, or extend Tyrann Mathieu, that would open it up where that would become a possibility. If they do that, I do like Matt Judon on a 1-year contract, something like that. I think that would be a nice fit. But honestly, I think the best way to go is the draft, because you have a number of guys that, quite frankly, are long and tall and strong, exactly what Spags wants.
Right.
And I think you can get somebody, you don't have to go with 31. You can probably get it done in the 3rd round as well, and have somebody that can man and actually produce pressure from the other side as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I got 2 more questions for you. One of them is just a fun little thing that I had planned, but my second one is my concern with the wide receiver group. So, as you know, Sammy Watkins is a free agent. He was the Chiefs' number 2 wide receiver when he was on the field. And then you have McCole Hardman, who I want to be respectful. I feel like he leaves a lot to be desired for a number 2 receiver. He'll have his plays, and make no mistake, he's still a weapon for this team. He's going to have his big plays, but I just don't know if he can play that X role like you've mentioned over and over again. So, again, is this somewhere where the Chiefs, have to go out and get maybe a veteran wide receiver in free agency? And I think they'll definitely draft one, almost certainly. But even then, if they draft one, is that enough, or do they have to go out and get a veteran?
You need at least 2 new bodies, both that hopefully can either be proficient enough against the press that you feel that they can man the X pretty regularly.
Yeah.
But they also have to have speed. The Chiefs do not want to go away from speed. So
right.
It is important. When you see 40 numbers, watch them. When you see the league wants to drift towards the GPS stuff. So if you see miles per hour above 20, that's a receiver the Chiefs will be interested in. That's what fits. I think they'll end up having both. And I think, honestly, the cap space that Patrick creates and whatever else that they get done, I think that would be more aimed towards a veteran wide receiver than it would an edge rusher or even a tackle at this point.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know how realistic this is. I think he's right. He's going to be too expensive. But honestly, my dream would be to add Marvin Jones. I think he's perfect for this team. He's got a little bit of speed. He's got the size, kind of that red zone target that the Chiefs don't really have. The physical kind of receiver, But I have a feeling he'll probably be a little too expensive this year, which is a shame. But we'll see what the Chiefs can do. It'll definitely be interesting to watch, and definitely to address wide receiver for sure. But one last question that I had for you was, and this is an interesting one. This is one that has been going around. So of all the pending Chiefs free agents, off the top of your head, if you could only bring back one, who would it be? And if you are forgetting who and who is not a free agent, I have the list in front of me if you want me to read it off. But do you have someone in mind that the Chiefs got to bring this guy back?
Got to? I really don't have a got to. I think we've reached the end of a lot of contracts where this is a natural progression. I think advantageous, like who could be the best in coming back, is probably Bashaud Breeland to keep that thing locked down. And that's not to say that don't get another corner either.
Right.
But impact wise, what I'll tell you is what I'm unfortunately fairly optimistic that the Chiefs really want that one guy to be Sammy Watkins.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can get the contract down low enough, that's fine. But in terms of snaps, Sammy might be your number 2 when he's on the field, but he's not on the field enough.
Yeah.
So it's really got to be an economical deal. So
yeah, my personal feelings about Sammy Watkins. I've always defended the guy. I've been a huge fan of him. Believe it or not, I actually had a Buffalo Bills Sammy Watkins background on like one of my tablets or whatever, because he was one of my favorite non-Chiefs for years. So I was psyched when we picked him up. But for me, it's gotten to the point where it's like, I love Sammy. And even if he's willing to come back for like 3, 4, 5 million, even then, I just don't know if I can do it because he's just not on the field enough. But I love Sammy. So it's really, really difficult. But I got to say, my pick for the one free agent I would bring back, and it's not really a popular answer, but I just really like him. Damian Wilson, the linebacker. I just think he's really solid. He was cheap for us. I think he's someone that you can bring back at a similar number that he was already playing on. And just linebacker depth is hard to come by, and I just really like Damian Wilson. I think he's solid. That being said, I still want them to address linebacker this offseason, but I think Damian Wilson is just a really solid player.
He is. He's nice and even-keeled. He will give you the effort. The question is, I think there are other teams around the league that will cover that as well.
Yeah.
And does he get the contract that just makes him untenable to pay here?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. This market is going to be completely unpredictable. And walking back a little bit to Sammy Watkins, I even said this offseason, because I actually recently accepted a role at Arrowhead Addict, the Chiefs website. So I write for them now, and I actually had an article about Sammy Watkins and Brett Veach. He's got to be careful with his love for Sammy Watkins this offseason because, they said they'll try to bring him back, but I just don't. He's got to be careful. I don't want him to get a little too excited and give him a deal that he regrets. But
well, and there's a comfort factor too.
Yeah.
And hey, knock it out over there at Addict. That was one of the stops along my way as well.
Yeah. It's really fun. Yeah, Matt Connor, the lead editor there, he's super nice. We got a fun thing going on over there, and it's super fun. I love it a lot. It's a fun time of the year. And Ryan, I got to say, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm glad we can make it work. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure. It was super fun to talk to you, and I was waiting forever to reveal to you that I was a frequent commenter on your show because you only see the names on the screen every week, and you don't really know a lot of the people. But it's just it's really fun. But everyone who joined us today, make sure you check out RGR Football here on YouTube and check out the Rogue Analytics Athletic Matrix when it comes out. And make sure you listen to Locked On Chiefs as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Peace, everybody.